The grand nation of Kislev has finally arrived, marching out of the cold north to defend the entirety of the old world against the endless horrors of chaos. An impossible task, yet one accepted with grim determination, for should they fail, then theirs will be the first land to suffer beneath the gaze of the dark gods. For over 1,000 years, this proud nation has stood strong against the northern powers. But what is the secret to their strength? While they do effectively utilize black powder weapons and summon the children of the bear god Urson into battle, these are fairly recent developments in the grand scheme of things. Black powder is still a relatively new technology for the Polks of the Ice Queen, only having been adopted after the defenders of Kislev witnessed the impressive firing lines by their allies from the Empire during the Great War against Chaos roughly 2 centuries ago. Even then, it took until the time of Tsar Boris Boka, Tsarina Katarin's missing father, for the full utilization of black powder as he emptied Kislev's treasuries to bring his nation roaring into the modern world of warfare. The Tsar also proved instrumental in reviving the cult of Urson, which had gone virtually extinct due to the predations of Chaos and the lack of a high priest in over 400 years. It was Radi Boka who undertook the initiation ritual of Urson and went out alone to tame a wild bear, earning the favor of his god when he successfully battled and befriended the immense bear named Erskine. So here, we see 2 of Kislev's greatest tools against chaos, yet they are new developments that hardly stretch back even 2 generations. So, what is the secret? Well, I'm sure you've all figured it out by now. Ice magic. The lore of ice is horrifically powerful, and one of the deadliest lores known across the old world. But just what is ice magic, though? Isn't it strange how the only practitioners of these mighty spells are the ice witches? Surely the foul sorcerers of chaos or the scholarly wizards of the Empire would desire to unlock the secrets of this lore, or even the cruel dark elves of Nagaroth and the ancient Slann of Lustria. And yet, only the frost maidens of the frozen tundra can wield this power. Would you like to know the answer? The key to this riddle? Well then, I shall tell you the one word that explains everything. Kislev. That's right, Kislev. That one word is the key, the answer. The name that represents the capital founded nearly 1,000 years ago by Shoika, the last of the Khan queens and first of the Tsarinas. A name that has come to represent the people of this land and even the very nation itself. But what if I told you that none of these are what the one word actually refers to? What if I told you that Kislev is not originally the name of a city, a people, or a country? What if I told you that Kislev is not the name of something, but instead someone? A being older than any man, woman, or beast in that frozen land. An entity so powerful that the dark gods themselves could do little more than trap it, or should I say her. The source of ice magic and even more incredible powers that help shield the old world from chaos is in fact a spirit. A mysterious but undeniably powerful creature known to the wise as the Ancient Widow. She is Kislev, the land itself, and all the countless spirits of nature that roam it. Allow me then to tell you about this enigmatic being. Allow me to tell you about Kislev. The history of this powerful spirit is wrapped up entirely with the formation of Kislev as a nation. Over 1,000 years ago, the Gospodars were a proud nomadic people that roamed the endless steppes north of the Darklands. They were unrivaled in warfare upon horseback, able to claim victory against the tribes of the Hung, Norse, and even the Kurgan. However, things began to turn against them, as the Chaos Wastes themselves began to expand, as the power of the Dark Gods swelled. The frigid Northlands became even more hostile, as the corruptive energies of chaos began to warp the Endless Steppes, the might of those murderous tribes that worshipped the Dark Brothers growing as a result. The Gospodars found themselves fighting a war they could not win alone, yet they were too stubborn to bow before the gods of chaos who demanded that they do so, and thus sought aid from other gods. They begged for aid from any power that would listen, and first attracted the attention of Ursun, the god of bears, who took pity on humanity. He taught them how to survive the increasingly deadly winters, how to war against the legions of chaos, and how to respect the spirits of the land, thus earning their aid. Yet this was not enough. The Gospodars still stood little chance against the might of chaos. Then came a great spirit, calling itself the Ancient Widow, Kislev, or simply the Land. And it whispered to a shaman priestess named Mishka. It offered her immense power if she swore to seize a distant frozen realm where the spirit was trapped by the demon gods. The shaman, desperate to aid her people, accepted this bargain, and thus was granted the power of winter itself in return. With the Ancient Widow's guidance, Mishka quickly mastered her new powers, and became the first of the Ice Witches. Utilizing her new abilities to gather what she required to fulfill her promise, Mishka united the scattered Gospodar tribes into a single people, and claimed rulership as the first of the Khan Queens. With this accomplished, she led her people on a quest to discover the land of the Ancient Widow. For decades they wandered, until one fateful day, Khan Queen Mishka led the Gospodars to victory over a tribe known as the Ungol's in the mountain route we know today as High Pass. Looking upon the lands west of the World's Edge Mountains, Mishka and the Ice Witches she had trained over the years saw how the snow-covered plain before them pulsed with icy power. At last, they had found the land they promised to conquer. The Gospodars sounded the horns of war and unleashed their might against those who called the North home, easily sweeping aside all who opposed them, as the magic of the Ice Witches reached even deadlier heights, empowered as it was by the land itself. The Gospodars successfully captured much of the Frosted Plains, including the city of Prague, before the Khan Queen Mishka received an unknown vision from the Ancient Widow that caused her to suddenly gather her mightiest warriors, and she marched into the north, never to be seen again. Before she left, Mishka handed her magical war blade, Fearfrost, to her daughter Shoika, and it is believed by the Kislevites that she will return when Kislev needs her most. Though many suggest that this has already occurred, via reincarnation in the form of Katerin, the current Tsarina. Back to our history, at this point Shoika established the start of a new age by founding the nation and city she named Kislev, creating the Gospodaran calendar, and discarding the title of Khan Queen to be replaced by Tsarina. Her first act in this new role was to lead her people in one last war against the Ungol's, attacking the port city of Novgorod, which eventually fell before her ice magic within 2 years and was renamed to Erengrad. So now, the land of the Gospodars stretched from the eastern World's Edge Mountains and frankly a little way beyond, all the way to the west where it connected with the Sea of Claws. With that, the Ungol's were utterly crushed and fled into the north, until being pursued and finally forced to submit to the Gospodars, which then they were brought into the fold. Thus was the Kislev we all know and love born, with the Gospodars and the Ungol's united under one banner. and the promise to the ancient widow fulfilled. Now, you may be wondering why I bothered explaining the foundation of Kislev as a nation as part of understanding the ancient widow. The reason is to fully explain how crafty and dangerous this powerful entity truly is. Because you see, the ancient widow did not only teach the Gospodars how to cast magic. Oh no, that was actually her second attempt at teaching the women of a tribe how to use magic so that they might protect her lands from chaos. The ancient widow's first students were actually the Ungolls. Who do you think taught the hag witches how to use the lore of hags? The magic that allowed them to commune with and summon the spirits of the land, to ward against the corruptions of chaos and disease, and even predict the future or curse their enemies. Yet their power alone was not enough for the ancient widow, and so she sought another, teaching them the magic of winter, and then had both of these tribes combine into the single nation of Kislev once the Gospodars had successfully claimed the lands they promised to seize, proving themselves. We'll circle back around to the magics of the ancient widow in just a minute, but for now let's talk more about her specifically and what information we have on this curious spirit. The origins of the ancient widow are entirely unknown. All that can be said with any certainty is that she is bound within, or perhaps beneath, the land named after her. There is strong evidence to suggest that the ancient widow's source of power, or perhaps her physical form or body, is located beneath the remote, hidden fortress called Zvenilev, which I probably butchered that, located within a forest in the mountains northeast of Fort Ostrosk. Though the vast majority of the ancient widow's power courses beneath the entirety of Kislev itself, contained within ley lines through which ice magic flows between various magical nexus points. These points are typically capped by oghams, or ancient standing stones, which reveals a fascinating truth about the ancient widow and her power. Some of you may actually see where this is going if you're familiar with me talking about lore, and especially lizardmen lore. This mysterious entity, who I will note does not appear to be a god by any standard measures in the Warhammer universe, in that she's not worshipped, nor desires worship, and does not have any functioning cults. She seems to have somehow tapped into a notable portion of the geomantic web built by the Old Ones and the Lizardmen over 10,000 years ago, and altered its power to suit her own abilities and needs. Ultimately, though, she still seeks to guard it from the predations of chaos, keeping it natural and pure, charging both the hag and ice witches with protecting these nexus points from destruction or corruption, which is why the land of Kislev exists, the nation of Kislev exists. Moving forward with some more details about the ancient widow, her appearance is known, surprisingly enough, because powerful wise women, who are known more commonly as hag mothers or babas in the Kislevite language, can use their sorceries to transform themselves into the ancient widow's likeness. The form of the ancient widow can best be described as utterly terrifying. A withered, gray-haired monstrosity over 8 feet in height, with glowing eyes, rusted sharp metal teeth, and long iron talons that can cut through any armor. Possessed with incredibly keen senses and afraid of nothing, the manifestations of the ancient widow are more akin to warlike demigods upon the battlefield for those unfortunates who must face this nightmare. Speaking of which, let's talk more about magic. The lore of the hags and the lore of ice are both creations of the ancient widow. Incredibly interesting lores of magic that function in a very unique way. Unlike every other proper lore of magic, so to speak, the witch lores, called such as they are used by hag witches and ice witches, are not cast using the winds of magic. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. Instead, the spells cast by witches are sort of filtered through the essence of the Ancient Widow herself, purifying them of their corruptive and chaos energies, functioning almost more like a form of geomancy wielded by the Slawn of Lustria. You can almost think of it as the Ancient Widow is functioning almost like a Slawn that is being used as a filter for a skink priest to cast, for instance, as kind of an example. For the lore of the hags, the actual magic itself is pulled from the spirits of Kislev, innumerable magical entities that only those gifted with second sight, meaning those able to see the winds of magic and its manifestations, can see. However, these spirits are in truth fragments of the Ancient Widow herself, little pieces of her, similar to how demons are all fragments of the Chaos Gods. Though the spirits of Kislev are more akin to the forest spirits of Athel Loren, as they're more natural creatures and they tend to be more, not flat out malicious, but more of tricksters, though they can still be dangerous, and there are some among them that are exceedingly powerful and dangerous. But just like the forest spirits of Athel Loren, their life, or their very essence, is bound to the land of Kislev itself. The lore of ice, on the other hand, is colossal magical power channeled through the Ancient Widow's cold heart, which purifies it, but makes it immensely dangerous to wield because you're wielding the very essence of this, not god, but still godlike creature. It would be like trying to wield the power of Athel Loren itself as opposed to just one of the 8 winds of magic. And furthermore, it, interestingly, is the lore of ice, that is, impacted by the seasons. It is a lore that is at its absolute height when used in the winter months, and at its absolute weakest when used in the summer months. Kind of a flip of what we expect from the things we see in Athel Loren or other nature-charged aspects or places in Warhammer Fantasy. But once again, and I cannot reiterate this enough times, the Ancient Widow is not a god, as her power, her magic, is not invoked through ritual or prayer, but instead by utilizing similar methods to traditional lores of magic. If anything, it's much more like the lores of the Greenskins, the lore of the Big Wa and the Little Wa, or the lore of the Ogres, the lore of the Great Maw, as opposed to the prayers of faith that you would see for the human gods, like Sigmar or Urson. However, like all magic, these two lores come with unique drawbacks. The lore of the hags is much safer to practice than most lores of magic, in that the caster is pretty much guaranteed not to explode at any point, but it requires the binding of spirits of Kislev, who often can ask for heavy prices in return for their power should they slip free of the hag's control, which is bound to happen eventually. The most common of these prices is that they feed upon the youth of the caster, which is why virtually all hag witches appear as hideously old crones, regardless of their actual age. Though, amusingly, this is only a matter of appearance. Their physical and mental abilities remain surprisingly strong and more of what you would expect for their age. Not to mention, the Babas often live far longer than normal humans thanks to their sorceress abilities. Lastly, while hag witches are gifted impressive power that can be utilized quite well upon the battlefield, their lore does not possess the awe-inspiring might to obliterate regiments of enemies or cut down terrifying monsters like you're used to seeing with many lores of magic. On the other hand, the lore of ice is easily one of the most devastating lores that doesn't utilize dark magic, at least. But the price can be exceptionally steep. By far, the most common way for an Ice Witch to die is simply losing control of the Ancient Widow's power, the icy magic overwhelming them in a glacial surge that turns the caster and everything around them into pure ice. The vast majority of girls who are selected because they have the gift, the spark of magic, to learn and master this lore meet their deaths because of this. The vast majority, I mean, a good probably 70 to 80% of the girls who attempt to become Ice Witches don't make it, because the power is just too great. The Ancient Widow can only be utilized properly by girls who are truly, truly strong and able to resist, or at the very least not goof up, their spells. Quite nasty. Anyway, I think that's enough to explain the true power behind Kislev and give you a good solid foundation for the mysterious entity that guided the creation of this nation. Hopefully, this proved a fascinating discussion for you all, and I can't help but wonder if perhaps the Ancient Widow is the wounded god Warhammer 3 will revolve around, at least for Kislev. Granted, she's not a god, but frankly, with the immense power she wields, she might as well be one, and I could see Creative Assembly or Games Workshop updating her to be one. And if she were to die, Kislev would be in deep, deep trouble. Oh, and for those wondering why there are no male hag or ice witches, the Ancient Widow seems to have a deep distaste for men, and has given many prophecies about how if a man were to ever learn these lores of magic, it would mean the literal death of the nation of Kislev. Whoever she loved or married to eventually become a widow clearly did not leave her with happy memories, but instead turned her into a frigid and bitter entity that only desires guarding her lands from the corruption of chaos. Strange, but ultimately she seems to be doing a good thing, at least by protecting the world's standards. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. The Ancient Widow is a truly fascinating spirit within Warhammer Fantasy, and makes for an interesting figure that empowers and rules Kislev from the shadows. Urson and the Orthodoxy may be the kings in the spotlight, especially because religion is considered a man's world in Kislev. They really don't encourage women being involved in religion, at least in Kislev. But the real power resides in the frosted hands of a terrifying crone. I'd love to hear what you thought of the Ancient Widow in the comment section down below. Do you find her amazing, interesting, bizarre, ridiculous? Be sure to let me know. I'll try to answer any questions I see about her, but honestly, she is a very vague and mysterious being. I'm not even sure what the hell she is. I do have some theories on it though, but that'll be for another time. That's it for me today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.